Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Thanks for having me here.
Wonderful. So James, besides actually recently seeing The Martian, I'm not sure I could have followed that fascinating talk. We have much to add, but we have a lot to talk about in terms of the future of the television industry, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
My first question is, you got a new job on July 1st, taking the CEO reins at 21st Century. What's it been like?
Well, I think it's an incredible time in the business. I would say, when I look at the title of this, and after that, I'm thinking about maybe we should be talking about Fox Mulder in the future. One of the new things we're doing is actually bringing the X-Files back next year, which is going to be fantastic. So I'm with the lady who asked the question about the cover-up. So it's a fun time to be in the television and entertainment business, and I think it's never been kind of more engaging to be part of, a large entertainment company, given all of the changes that are happening in our industry and in adjacent sort of sectors. We see an enormous amount of opportunity and obviously a lot of challenges, but it's been a great start so far, and the company has, good velocity, but it's a very interesting time.
Wonderful. So I want to start by talking about the business models around television. We're at this fascinating moment where distribution is no longer constrained, right? And I think, we spend a lot of time, is it bundles, is it advertising? But if you had the ideal business model for Fox going forward in a world of infinite distribution, what does that look like in terms of just pushing that business if you're not constrained?
Well, I think what's really interesting about sort of the way customers are consuming entertainment and video generally is that they're really in a moment right now where you experience kind of what you could call ultimate plurality, where you have an infinite amount of choices, you have availability of everything that's ever been made, essentially on every device. If you think that broadband is either now in some places or is almost kind of ubiquitous in parts of the world. So I think that ultimate plurality is something that is hugely exciting for customers. And when I think about it from a business model perspective or, and how that's evolving, I actually think it's a very exciting time because when you have an environment where the content itself, the creative assets or news and information that's there is really what's driving demand, the idea that, that content can create a platform and create a platform that is available everywhere, available to customers on multiple devices, and we have some notion as a supplier of identity of those customers, some notion, just enough, you can have a much more efficient business. You can have a more exciting business in terms of innovative new products. You can have a better customer experience with respect to less advertising, more targeting.
So what's the business model?
So I think that is actually where we're moving to, which is a video entertainment business that is 100% consumed over IP networks, is actually potentially an ideal business model, and one that I think is not so much a fantasy to say.
Subscription?
Well, I think it's a combination, and I think that's a question of pricing. So, for some customers, they'll be very keen to have less advertising. But I think also a lot of customers, a lot of viewers, if you will, are already understanding that there's an economic transaction there. If I look at the gaming business, for example, people, particularly kids, have a very easy understanding of if I watch this advertisement, I'll earn points, or I can spend money for that. And the idea that on a IP network or in a streaming environment, the viewer becomes essentially the third bidder for his or her time and can value that time very precisely, that I think is a really exciting prospect in terms of how the business model can become much more flexible, but also...
flexible in terms of... What do you mean by flexible?
Flexible in terms of pricing for customers.
Pricing.
So, and I think there's.
So
I don't think there's one.
Does that mean breaking up the bundle, or?
I don't really think so. I mean, the one thing about bundling, in general, with a lot of goods and services, is that it generally will drive prices down and consumption up because the friction between different providers goes down.
And everyone forgets that, right? I think it's an important point, and particularly in Silicon Valley tech land, we think bundles are evil. But they're not, right?
No, they're not, and I think you can look at lots of firms that are that have subscription pricing for a variety of services. It's the same theory as bundling television shows or films or whatever it is. The question of the size of bundles and how the packaging works and what's the right size of the right size and the right content within a bundle. That's a question that is found out in the marketplace. And I would look at.
Where we are at this moment, are we going to see an Apple bundle anytime soon?
I think it's really. I mean, at this point, it's really a question for them. Everyone has been, wondering about when they're actually going to be able to pull that together. But I think there's a real issue, or not an issue, but an interesting moment here where we're tending to see, and I think the outside world is tending to see, this is a binary choice between sort of very low cost, kind of much smaller bundles around Netflix as a bundle of things, Hulu Plus as a bundle of things, or the sort of all-you-can-eat kind of buffet of $90, $100. And I think in an environment where a rebundling happens, you'll see different products emerge at different price points in between. And that's really the way that it's worked around the world. I mean, it's unusual in the United States that the so-called sort of the main television experience that people have is sort of all in, whereas you have much different packaging options across Europe, for example, and other emerging markets where it's been kind of a more dynamic and evolved way to price and package these things.
Is Fox going to launch its own streaming service?
Look, I think that the large content sort of companies, large creative companies that can provide, can really put volume and quality together, have a lot of options now in terms of either packaging things directly to customers as an independently priced over-the-top offering, but also I think it's important that we think about how we slice and dice rights and windows and things like that and start to simplify those things such that both on an authenticated basis, either bundled with other providers, customers get a better experience, more availability, without arbitrary holdbacks and blackout periods and all of those things, and have a more continuous availability of programming, because that's ultimately what customers expect. And I think the average customer really doesn't care about why we happen to window a product in this way and not that way, and why one show is available the last 5 episodes, but not any more than that, and other shows are available, with a full series stack. Those are things that I think will break down, and when you simplify the windowing, which I think is something that is sort of gradually happening and maybe a sharper pivot in the future, I think is, that's something that I think unleashes a whole lot of potential in terms of attracting customers, in terms of TV everywhere as an experience being really great, and new entrants being able to enter the market even faster.
So a yes, no on Fox doing it, maybe? Just because I think one of these questions is, as this bundle breaks up, who are going to be the rebundlers, right? And the networks are doing it, and we're seeing streaming services from, Disney and many others who are moving into that direction. There's the tech platforms like Apple that's doing it. I mean, do you see Fox being a B2C brand versus a B2B in some ways?
I think it's going to be. I think it's a little more subtle than that. I don't think it's sort of binary. I think probably both. Yeah. And when you look at the industry, the entertainment industry has really been characterized over the last 100 years by wave after wave of technological revolutions, really, from sound and talkies in the theater, all the way through from broadcast television to cable, then satellite. The home entertainment business has changed dramatically as well, now being really a primarily streaming business. So, all of these waves have been generally characterized by new entrants, creating new ways to sell entertainment product, and has generally been something that has not fundamentally destroyed the past, but has actually pulled the whole business forward and new models emerged. So it's been a pretty adaptive industry. I'm not convinced that everybody wins in a streaming future, but I do know that... Who
doesn't win in a streaming future?
Well, I think that the fundamental challenge that all entertainment investors have, or creative companies have, is how do we invest in creators and create a platform where they can do incredible work and do a high volume of that, and content that really means something for customers. So I think one of the issues that has happened over the last number of years is, maybe 20 years or 30, is as the multi-channel television grew, a lot of people were just kind of taking up space on the dial. And I think there's a lot of programming out there that probably isn't as distinctive as it could be, that is maybe not invested enough. I think brands are very, very important currently and in the future, and more so in the future in a streaming television and film environment. So I think actually the ability to create content that really, really matters for customers, that people are passionate about, is important. And I think firms that maybe are not differentiated enough, or product that's not differentiated enough and distinctive and powerful, I think is going to suffer, and we'll have to find new ways to reach customers.
So bad content suffers in a streaming future?
It's not so much bad, it's about distinctiveness, right? And I think the question becomes, are there better ways to achieve those goals? If you're, if you're making cooking shows that aren't so much entertainment shows, but cooking, showing people how to do recipes, right? The internet is much, much better at that. So it's a little like, classified advertising in newspapers versus online. There's fundamentally a better way to achieve the same goal of teaching somebody how to make a souffle.
Yeah, and those businesses have different economics, right, too, which bears
So I think there's no reason to hang on to one way of distributing that product when there's a fundamentally better way to do it. So there'll be a thinning, if you will, of some of this as it shifts to primarily other formats.
Got it. So speaking of brands, you guys entered into a joint venture with National Geographic recently.
Yes.
$750 million. And when I saw that, it was actually around the same time that NBC had invested in Vox and BuzzFeed. And not that it's an either or, but it struck me as maybe older school magazine versus some newer digital media thing, upstarts. And so I guess two questions. One, what are you excited about with Nat Geo? What's the plan? Why the brand? And then also, not that it's an opportunity cost, but how do you look at the digital investing environment? And do you want to place some big bets there as well?
Well, I think, first of all, on National Geographic, we are hugely excited, people probably maybe don't know, but we formed a joint venture called National Geographic Partners, which really contains all of the commercial activities of the National Geographic Society, from their digital assets to the television channels, which we've been in a venture with them on for a number of years, to the magazine itself, as well as offshoot businesses like the travel business and cartography and things like that. And I guess, we believe fundamentally that, big brands really matter in the world, and I don't think there's a more beloved global brand, or very few, that are of the scale and quality of National Geographic, given its heritage, and given the fact that it's been such a consistently high quality and kind of mission-driven brand around science and exploration and conservation. And we're very excited about that as an opportunity to really grow that brand and do great things. I think, a lot of people focus on it because the magazine is the iconic sort of flagship product.
Print, now you're back in the print business.
But it's been the most, I think I can't name another print magazine or print brand that started that way that has been able to deliver the kind of digital impact that National Geographic has. They're one of the largest, they have one of the largest social footprints in terms of Instagram and things like that. They have an enormous digital sort of asset base with respect to content and from infographics to articles to science and video. It's just a tremendous set of assets there that we think can be really great. And I guess to your point about digital versus not, or traditional versus new media, we really don't believe in those distinctions anymore. I think, fundamentally all of our businesses are digital, and all of them will be completely digital in time. And I look at the National Geographic business as very much a digital business with a brand that is very, very powerful that can push it forward. We do invest in other kinds of firms as well. We're investors in a variety of companies, from Roku to Vice,
right?
et cetera.
Yeah.
And we like doing that from time to time. But more and more, 21st Century Fox we're an operating company as well. We're not a fund, and we like to pull these businesses together. We like to operate them and really kind of operate at a real high velocity. But we don't see those things as mutually exclusive, and I think that...
Did you look at the Vox or BuzzFeed investment opportunities?
We don't comment on bits and pieces like that, but we look, a lot of things come across the desk, so...
Yeah. I mean, more generally, in terms of being a buyer or seller of those kinds of assets right now, do you think digital media prices are rational, overpriced? How do you just look at that? And do you look at those and go, no way, or...
Well, look, it's hard to tell. I think some of these, every firm is different and have different qualities, so it's hard to kind of make a general statement. But I would say, just in terms of values generally, I think we're at I don't know what inning we're in this kind of market over the last decade, but it's not the third.
It's not
so, I think you have to be really mindful when you're deploying capital that, things go up and down and things are very volatile.
Mm-hmm. Do you see... are you in a mode of looking to invest in digital media assets right now, or do you think, do you have a pace of aggressiveness that you have in mind?
When we think about investing, first of all, we like to invest in ourselves. We think that, we want to invest in great programming, we want to invest in great films and great television shows and great content. We also need to invest in capability. I think it's super important as we look at, an environment where everything is IP delivered, as I said before. There's a whole lot of capabilities that, we need to develop, and I think everyone needs to develop in terms of advertising technology, measurement, analytics, management, all of those things. And we've made small acquisitions in those areas, in ad technology, for example, and we'll probably continue to do things that can really increase capability. And I think you'll see more and more of that because these distinctions between traditional and digital are sort of gone. And what you're really trying to create is a platform where this content can really live for customers, and it can be discovered, and you can and you can make a good return on it for you and your partners who create them.
Yeah. You mentioned digital advertising. You guys recently acquired a video ad company. Any other areas there not that there are people trying to pitch you today, but what's on your roadmap? I mean, commerce. Where do you see some of those?
I think I think advertising. On the short-term basis, I think there's a real issue in the advertising market right now. I think that television advertising remains incredibly impactful for marketers, and I think we see actually pretty good volume there. But I also think when you compare television advertising and then digital video advertising, and then you have other digital advertising there, I think there is a real problem of apples and oranges. Yeah. And I think measurement and standards, things around engagement and viewability are very, very important, so that marketers who are investing can actually get a better sense of what they're buying and what they're getting there. And I think over the next year or 2 years, actually, there's a lot of momentum and a number of players, from some of the big buying groups to some of the larger media firms like us, I think are going to be moving faster in establishing new ways to do that.
I hope so. I feel like the moving faster around addressable TV advertising has been a 10-year-old kind of thing, right? I mean, we think back to Canoe and cable companies of, I mean, I can't even remember what year that was. And so what has changed now? I mean, is it the urgency because the dollars are going to go elsewhere? Is it...
Well, I think one of the things that's changed is that you're not necessarily relying on, cable labs to figure it out, right? Which has never been a good bet. Yeah. So I think what we have today, where you can independently stream to customers, where you can, even product that, a company sells to a Comcast can be authenticated on somebody's Roku box, and we can develop the app, and we can develop the ad platform, and we can do all those things, and we can start to measure it directly. I think that's why there's going to be, and there is today, more innovation, and I think it's coming. In a streaming television environment, what's super exciting about it is that you can marry all of the analytics and all of the targeting and all of the sort of product innovation from an engagement perspective or interactive perspective with the kind of breadth and quality and sort of and impact of full screen audio-visual advertising. And we see early days, but really great returns where we can do that, both in terms of pricing, but also, and I think this will occur across the industry pretty much, the real ability is to decrease the advertising loads and make these things that we make, these movies and TV shows, we invest a lot to make them immersive, to get to a point where where there's a suspension of disbelief, and then we interrupt them to sell them bounty or something like that. And we have to really get away from that interruptive model, and I think we will. And I think the streaming environment is what gives us the opportunity and gives the whole industry the opportunity to start to innovate and find new and better ways to deliver for marketers, but also have something that is a better experience.
Mm-hmm. Any examples of the kind of lift in terms of CPM you think some of that is possible or that you're seeing today?
On small things like an engagement unit where you introduce to the customer that they're the third bidder and you say, would you like to watch a 30-second ad? Would you like to engage with an advertiser for 30 seconds and then watch the rest of the show ad-free, or we'll interrupt you?
Very early on.
Yeah. So we bought this company that does this. 85% of the customers who see this choice pick to engage with the advertisers. Another 70% or so of that, stay much more than the 30 seconds. And the price is more than enough to make up for all of the removal of the other advertising. So
how much more than enough, do you know?
Well, in a typical ad load in some of these shows that we would do, so it'd be 8, 9x, 10x.
That's pretty neat.
So it's and it's very powerful, and the advertiser actually then gets to give something to the customer, so they feel actually grateful. They say, wow, Audi brought me my show ad-free.
Yes.
It's kind of perverse, but that's the way that when you empower a customer and you give them the tools to do that, they react really well. And I think you have to trust them to be able to know how to do that, and I think they will.
Yeah. So some people are very bearish about the film industry right now, but you're not. You believe. I also sometimes think we focus so much on the great television coming out that we forget that there's also some great films coming out. So, I mean, tell us a bit into how you're thinking about, just your film entertainment business right now. And I also think we have a little treat for people to tease them about something that's upcoming. It's
really interesting. I mean, certainly the television business, the television production business is at there's a kind of theory of, are we at peak TV with sort of 400 scripted dramas, or scripted series kind of in production simultaneously? And we may or may not be. But I think there's certainly an enormous amount of quality in television. But people, but I also think the film business is an incredible business. And the ability for us as a company, one of the things we love is to be able to have a platform where, talent and creators can actually operate across the piece, be it films, be it normal television shows of 23 episodes or short form, things like that.
The film business isn't actually economically an incredible business right now,
well,
right?
It depends, right? I mean, we actually feel really good about our film company, and there's always risk, and you can't look at it in one quarter or 1 year. But what we try to do is have an approach that is very, very diverse creatively. So we're very proud of last year, for example. We were able to have a year in which we had, an X-Men movie, Grand Budapest Hotel, Gone Girl, and so on. So you can do franchise pictures, you can do original new stuff, you can do acquired, from books, and you can have something that is a really diverse slate. And we think that finds audiences in a good way, and we're very, very proud of that. And actually, we have something, I did want to show you something today. We have a new film, which is very much part of that sort of ethos, a new film which is coming out on Christmas Day called Joy, which David O. Russell made with Jennifer Lawrence about Joy Magnano, the inventor of the Miracle Mop. So I think, I just would say that, we just believe that great storytelling is so much more than, superhero movies. We love our superhero movies, but we think you have to take creative risks in different ways. And great storytellers to be able to come and make things, of a diverse nature is something that we're very, very proud of. And I think it's really important in order to be successful going forward to be able to continue to foster that and to be able to continue to do it at real scale and real volume.
So one more for me, and then we'll open it up so everyone get ready. So media companies, including your peers, have been buying back a lot of stock lately, and it's just an interesting question, I think, about investing in yourself, as you said, versus someone put it to me recently. It's like they'd be better off buying Bitcoin. So I think that there's just this sense of when you look at sort of where some of these big media companies are, where growth is coming from. Just walk us through sort of the rationale of buybacks versus potentially other uses. I mean, it's such a vibrant environment now. I think, there are real trade-offs and
there are
different mentality.
Look, I think there's always trade-offs when you think about sort of capital allocation and how you do it. For us, it's not a religion in terms of buybacks. So I think in some firms it is. It's more a question of excess capital. And we've done, we happen to have done a number of transactions and a number of things that have freed up a lot of capital. And we didn't really have something to do with it. Ultimately, it's the company's money, but that's shareholders' money, and you have to be mindful about what you do with it. And when you don't think you want to use it for acquisitions, and you're really just and you're sufficiently funded to invest in yourself, and you're growing at a rate that you're comfortable with, then it's perfectly reasonable to to distribute that capital, and in a variety of ways through dividends or buybacks or whatever it is. And I think it's just a question of managing that balance sheet in the right way. It's certainly a different world, maybe in the tech world around how they think about that.
Now we have tech companies doing them too,
but I think I think it's something that we do. We consider on a year-by-year basis and think about how much capital we need, what do we want to do with it, and sometimes the right answer is to distribute it.
So not buying Bitcoin is the right answer, just to be clear.
Well, I don't think I'd get it past the audit committee.
Okay, got it. Please step up to the mics. Over there.
Hi, Mark Brown from Initiative Media. So just a quick comment. FX and FXX, just brilliant. So whatever you do, please give John Landgraf whatever he wants and keep him in that spot because it's brilliant programming.
Thank you. I'll try. I will.
From an advertising standpoint, there's kind of an axiom that says, you're turning television dollars into digital dimes. So as consumer behavior goes more and more in that direction, how do you get the media pricing back to an equivalency to be able to keep monetizing, creating great programming?
Well, I think it's a good question. I'm not so sure that the equation going forward is, TV dollars to digital dimes. I think as television itself becomes digital, and customers are consuming it primarily on streaming services, I think, as I said before, we're actually able to, across the piece, have an advertising business that's actually more efficient, more effective for advertisers, and I think you can get premium pricing for that. I think the digital dimes part is really a question of sort of the apples and the oranges that I mentioned. To give you an example, if you look at, I was reading a blog post by Rob Norman at Group M, who's their chief digital officer, and he compared, I think it was Snapchat's daily 4 billion video views. And the way they calculate it, I guess, is, it's half the screen for 2 or 3 seconds, and it's how many video views go through. And he compared that 4 billion to, using the same math, the Women's World Cup broadcast of the final, which was on Fox and I think Univision in the Spanish language piece. And in that 2 hours, the equivalent math delivered 94.5 billion video views. So I think there's a real apples and oranges problem here, where those might be dimes in one place, but when you look at the engagement, the impact, and the volume of real viewership of advertising messages, I think there's a huge amount to play for in digital video if it's delivered in the right way, and if we measure it in an honest way and have real kind of verification around viewability, engagement, et cetera.
Thank you.
James, you mentioned the importance about storytelling just earlier on, and in the context of VR, right, the rules are completely changed about storytelling because you don't have the cinematographer or the director showing you where to look, because you have 360 degrees of freedom to look around. So one of the issues that we're running into in a documentary that we're shooting up in Svalbard is that we're actually not having a technological problem, but we're having more of a storytelling problem and how to shoot these types of films. So what's your opinion on how the industry is looking to change the way storytelling is from the traditional storytelling in Hollywood now?
It's a really good question, and you're right. It's a real challenge, and I know you're going to hear a bunch more about virtual reality this afternoon. But at least from a storytelling perspective, when you think about that challenge, there are people who are doing great work. We actually set up a little while ago a sort of virtual reality lab, if you will, at Fox Film, at 20th Century Fox Film. And the idea was really to start to collaborate with filmmakers to try to tackle those challenges. Obvious challenges are how you direct attention. There are ways to do that. The other challenges are, come around, what are the rules around, how you move the rig, for example? Can you induce, is it okay to induce vertigo? All of those sorts of things that I think storytellers are now starting to experiment with and learn that, for example, they shouldn't move the camera at anything other than a constant pace, because people get queasy, but you can otherwise induce vertigo gently. What's really interesting about the storytelling challenge, I think, is just how much empathy you can create. I mean, there are filmmakers who talk about virtual reality as sort of an empathy machine, and I think that's a very, very powerful notion. Another interesting thing is the question of, going from the general virtual reality piece today, where the camera is where the viewer is, for example, and looking around. A much more interesting piece is when we set the cameras around actually the set and look in, and that gives much more interaction and a different kind of experience where you can render the entire object in virtual reality as opposed to just view it from one angle or another. And I think that's going to be a real innovation in terms of how storytellers tackle it. But it's a really interesting challenge because you don't want to make it just video games. And I think it's a question of storytellers learning and filmmakers learning just exactly how much they should push and pull. In 3D filmmaking, for example, people talk about how much in certain scenes you want to dial up the interocular effects, and in other scenes they're not really necessary. And that's a question of learning and just using the new medium to go forward. I think we're at the stage where we're not even in talkies yet in virtual reality, and I think the next 100 years of that are going to be extraordinary. There's no question the trajectory creatively we're on is one where immersiveness and immersion is more and more manageable to create. And we will have entertainments that are indistinguishable from reality pretty soon.
When do you think we're going to have our first feature film in VR?
Well, I mean, today people are already doing some work around that. We have some stuff around The Martian that was done that way.
Consumer will go into a theater and instead of putting on the 3D glasses, be plugged in?
I think pretty soon. I mean, we're already seeing experiences like that. I think there are some issues around cost. You know, once you're not focused on glasses and a screen out there, and you're focused on putting the screen here and enclosing the viewer, there are cost issues there. But I think we're already seeing filmmakers do that, and I think it's very soon. Whether or not it'll be a big hit feature film, and when it gets to that tipping point, you know, remains to be seen. We're in early days, but I'm confident it will happen, and it'll be very exciting. There are lots of social questions around it too. There's a lot of.
Are we all going to go into a theater?
There's a lot of impact that I think we need to be thoughtful about in terms of as sort of society. I'm reminded of kind of Infinite Jest, you know, the David Foster Wallace book, that you know, people enslaved by this VHS tape, and that's we have to see what happens.
I think it's ominous, slightly ominous. Anyway, any more questions? I have a couple more. Okay, we'll keep teeing up. Donald Trump, good for television?
Why doesn't anybody have a question? Are you sure?
I was going to ask
go back
that
to those
anyway.
guys. I'd rather talk about virtual reality.
I thought someone else had asked us about it.
Look, I mean, I think the engagement in this political campaign by viewers and by citizens has been incredible. I mean, when you look at the numbers for those debates and all of that stuff, clearly there's something.
It's been great for advertising as well, right? Ratings and.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think certainly CNN had huge numbers with the Republican debate. Fox News did as well. And I think it's a really good sign that people are really engaging with this, that huge numbers of people are engaged in this political dialogue. And, you know, I think that it's a phenomenon that is not just about, you know, Mr. Trump doing that, but actually it's about, you know, a breadth of candidates there with, you know, a lot of different ideas, I guess. And people are interested. I think engagement with the process is good for the country. It's great for television if people really want to watch politics that much. But you know, we have to see what happens. I have to say, I think Fox News has covered this campaign, you know, really thoroughly, and you know, I thought handled the debates really well, and they were exciting and interesting, and you know.
Do you have any personal reaction to the Megyn Kelly remarks?
I think she was great. I think she asked tough questions and was strong, and I think you know, I know she's going to continue to be that way.
Awesome.
Just to follow on to that, I wonder if you feel that entertainment companies like 21st Century Fox and Fox News have a moral obligation to have a social conscience. As a leader, how do you get that across in your company?
Well, I think it's a good question. I think first of all, you know, as you know, being in the business of ideas, if you will, of storytelling, of creativity, as well as news, et cetera, you absolutely have an obligation to viewers and customers and to the audience generally. And I really believe that, you know, companies do need to stand for things at a corporate level, and you have to have a culture that is comfortable with, you know, being mission-driven, but also, particularly when you get into editorial policy, something where you also have editorial independence, where many, many voices can be heard. So I think there's a balance there between saying, you know, the firm, for example, you know, has certain policies, and people want to come and work for companies that believe in things, but also being a place where there can be a huge diversity of voices, from creative talent, from editorial, commentary, and all of those things as well. And you have to balance those things a little bit. But yes, I think employers and communicators have a responsibility to audiences and to society. I've always believed that, and I hope we're building a company here with a strong culture and strong values that will enable that.
Wonderful. Well, we're out of time, but thank you, and thank you, James, for joining us.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me.